Under the bodybuilding spotlights, control is everything, until it isn't. Sifiso Thabethe goes for his famous backflip in front of fans, then crashes head first and never gets back up. Giannis Magos completely loses it after hearing the final result, storms straight at a judge and slaps him to the floor. These are the moments bodybuilders lost control on stage. Number 9. Cphiso Tabete. Cphiso Thabethe was already on stage, flexing as the announcer praised what he had done in the sport. The room was ready for a show, not a disaster. He was wearing black posing trunks and socks, and the crowd was fully with him. Then came to the move people around him already knew. The backflip was not some wild idea he pulled out in that moment. It was the stunt he had become known for, the thing that made people cheer before he had even left the floor. That is what makes the footage so hard to watch. Everything about those first seconds looks normal, confident, and under control, right up until it suddenly is not. He was only 23. He came from Umlazi, just south of Durban, and he was not some random man trying to get attention at a small event. He was a rising South African bodybuilder with real momentum behind him. Not long before the accident, he had won a major junior title in Johannesburg. He was also widely described in South African bodybuilding coverage as an IFBB junior world champion in the 165-pound class. He had already built a name, already built real respect, and people in the sport saw him as a young athlete with a bright future, not as a performer doing tricks for cheap applause. On August 5, 2017, at a community hall in D section, Umlazi, that future ended in a few terrible seconds. He walked out while the crowd cheered, and the announcer talked him up. Then he moved into the backflip. Instead of completing the turn, he came down head first, crashing onto the back of his neck and collapsing on the floor. For a moment, the room seemed stuck. People were still trying to understand what they had just seen. Then, the panic started. Men rushed toward him when it became clear he was not getting up. The people around him tried to help, but the damage was already done. He was rushed to the hospital, and he was declared dead on arrival. What makes it even darker is how familiar that move was. Bodybuilding South Africa said the backflip was his signature, something he liked to do on stage. Wayne Price later said there was a suspicion that the socks may have affected his grip or cost him the momentum he needed. But that was only a suspicion, not a proven cause. Police opened an inquest after the death. Then the whole thing took on an ugly second life online. The video spread fast across social media, and his family begged people to stop sharing it. While they were trying to process what had happened, strangers were passing around the clip of his final seconds as if it were just another viral video. Number 8. Giannis Magos. At the 2016 IFBB Diamond Cup in Greece, Giannis Magos looked like a man who thought the biggest prize was already his. He had already won the 100-kilogram division, and that alone made him believe the overall title was close. His points were strong, his confidence was obvious. By the time the final result came, he was not standing there like a bodybuilder hoping for a miracle. He looked like someone waiting to hear what he already believed. Then the result went the other way. Even after winning his class, he was not named the overall winner. In a sport where everything depends on judging, that kind of result can hit like an insult. And on that stage, it lit the fuse almost instantly. What followed caught everyone off guard. Magos did not stay in place and complain from a distance. He marched toward the judges' area and went straight at longtime judge Armando Marquez. There were heated words first, then the whole thing snapped. Magos slapped Marquez hard across the face and knocked him to the ground. That was already enough to turn the show into a scandal, but it did not stop there. He then went after the judges' tables, overturning them as the scene spilled from one act of violence into full chaos. In seconds, the stage stopped looking like the end of a bodybuilding show and started looking on like a brawl. There were no poses, no trophies, no ceremony left, just a furious competitor in contest shape, attacking the people who had decided the result. Almost instantly, the focus shifted to serious punishment. Reports said he was facing the possibility of a lifetime ban. Number 7. Jahid Hassan Shuvo. The show should have ended cleanly. The winners were on stage at the 2022 National Bodybuilding Championship in Bangladesh. The medals had been handed out, and Jahid Hassan Shuvo had finished second. Then came the prize. Someone handed him a box blender in front of the crowd. For a second, it just looked awkward. Then his whole body changed. Instead of taking it, posing for the cameras, and leaving the stage like everyone expected, he snapped right there, under the lights. During the ceremony itself, he kicked the box away in front of everyone watching. That reaction hit so hard because Shuvo was not some unknown man making a scene at a small event. He was a former champion, which meant he came into that stage with status, pride, and a real reason to believe he deserved more than second place. He had not finished far down the list. He had come runner-up, close enough to the top for the result to feel personal. Later, he said the outburst was not really about the blender itself. He said it was his protest against what he believed was corruption, bias, and irregularities in the competition. In his mind, this was not a man rejecting a kitchen appliance. It was a man rejecting a result he believed was wrong. What made the clip so unforgettable was how strange and physical it looked. Shuvo received the prize, but there was no smile, no attempt to play along, no effort to hide the anger. He kicked the boxed blender away, then kicked it again, turning the ceremony into a public outburst in seconds. The fallout was brutal and fast. Within 2 days, the executive committee of the Bangladesh Bodybuilding Federation handed him a lifetime suspension. Reports said the decision was made in line with the rules of both the local federation and the IFBB, which gave the punishment even more weight. Shuvo defended what he had done by saying it was a reaction to corruption, but he also apologized for how he behaved. None of that changed the outcome. The ban still stood. Number 6. Greene and Heath. By the time pre-judging started at the 2014 Mr. Olympia in Las Vegas, the real fight was already obvious. Heath walked in as the 3-time reigning champion, the man every other bodybuilder was trying to knock off. Greene walked in as the biggest threat to that title, the man who had already finished second to Heath in 2 straight Olympias and looked ready to do everything he could to stop it from happening a 3rd time. The rivalry was already hot before they ever hit a pose. At the athletes' meeting, Kai had once again signed a poster with Mr. Olympia 2014 next to his name, and Heath took that as open disrespect toward the title he still held.
F you, Phil. I mean, it was bad.
So let's do it, Phil. Kick my ass then.
So when the top men were brought out for comparisons, the tension was already sitting right there between them. Heath was known for round muscle bellies, sharp detail, and the kind of confidence that came from winning the biggest title in the sport again and again. Greene was the challenger fans saw as the only man with the size, shape, and stage power to truly push him. He had finished runner-up in 2012 and 2013, and by 2014, a lot of people believed this might finally be his year. This was not some side feud between lesser names. This was the center of the sport, the 2 biggest figures in open bodybuilding, standing close enough to smell each other's tan under the brightest lights the sport had. Then the comparison round turned ugly. As the men posed beside each other, smiles disappeared, and the energy changed fast. Greene turned toward Heath and started jawing at him from only inches away. Heath fired right back. They were no longer just hitting poses for the judges. They were squaring up in the middle of pre-judging with the entire arena watching. The crowd could feel it. Other competitors on stage stopped mattering. Dennis Wolf was moved between them as officials tried to create space, and head judge Steve Weinberger shouted for numbers 16 and 17 to spread out. That tells you how close it got. The judges were trying to stop the top 2 men in the show from turning a comparison into a fight. No punch was thrown, but the line looked paper thin. One more step, one more shove, one more bad second, and bodybuilding would have had a full brawl on its biggest stage. Then came the final result. Heath won his 4th Sandow. Greene finished second for the 3rd straight year. That gave the confrontation even more sting. Kai had come into the contest trying to prove he could finally take the title, and instead the weekend ended with the same placing in one of the most famous near fights bodybuilding had ever seen. Phil later tried to smooth it over by calling it a friendly exchange, and Kai smiled when he spoke about it afterward, but the footage told the real story. There was nothing friendly about those faces when they were chest to chest on that stage. Number 5. Mickey Theo. Mickey Theo had been around long enough to know exactly how a big bodybuilding night was supposed to end. He was not some unknown competitor who showed up once, got angry, and vanished. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, he had already built a real track record on the British scene. He finished second in the heavyweight class at the 1987 EFBB British Championships. The next year, he took 4th in the under 198-pound class at the British Championships. Then in 1990, he won the heavyweight class at that same show. That gave him years of work, years of near misses, and years of standing close enough to the top to feel exactly what a bad result could do to a man's pride. By the time he stepped into the 1992 British Championships, he was not just chasing a placing. He was chasing the kind of finish that would finally match the years he had already put in. The moment it all broke came on October 11th, 1992, at Wembley Conference Center. The building was full, the show was major, and the awards were already underway when Theo heard the placing that set him off. He was announced 4th in the heavyweight class. That was the trigger. Instead of stepping forward, taking the trophy, and getting through the ceremony like everyone expected, he walked off the stage and refused to accept it. That first walk-off was already enough to jar the room. The ceremony had its own rhythm, and everybody in the building knew it. Placings were being called, trophies were being handed out, and the evening was supposed to move towards celebration. Theo broke that rhythm the second he turned his back and left. But that first exit was only the start. What makes the clip unforgettable is what happened next. He came back. He did not stay backstage and cool off. He returned to the stage angry, and that second entrance changed the whole scene from a bad reaction into a full public tantrum. Theo went for the first place trophy, grabbed it, hurled it onto the floor. Then he stormed off again. The scale of the event made it hit even harder. This was not some tiny side contest with a few people in folding chairs. The evening show had 47 men across 4 weight classes. There was an overall pose down. The 2 overall winners earned pro cards. Guest stars were part of the night too, including Kevin Levrone, who had just finished runner-up at the Olympia only weeks earlier. Everything about the event was built around status, ceremony, and a sense that British bodybuilding was putting on one of its biggest stages of the year. The fallout was serious. Theo was later suspended for 2 years. Number 4, Breon Ansley. At the 2021 Mr. Olympia press conference in Orlando, the classic physique face-off was supposed to be simple. Chris Bumstead was there as the reigning champion. Terrence Ruffin was there after finishing runner-up the year before. Breon Ansley was there too, and from the start, he looked like the man most determined to take over the room. Then he made sure everybody looked at him. In the middle of the press conference, before the contest had even started, Breon took off his shirt and began showing off his physique right there on stage. In a setting built for talk, predictions, and stare-downs, he turned the whole thing into something else. The mood changed immediately. What should have been a routine pre-show moment suddenly felt tense, personal, and very hard to ignore. That moment carried weight because Breon Ansley was not some random challenger trying to go viral for a few seconds of attention. He was already one of the biggest names in the division. By then, he was a 2-time Classic Physique Olympia champion, and he was also the man who had beaten Chris Bumstead before Bumstead took over the division. That history matters because it changes the whole feel of the stunt. This was not a newcomer acting out. This was a former king trying to take space back from the man now wearing the crown. The division was already heated. Bumstead and Ansley had already shared tense moments on stage in earlier Olympias, and by 2021, the rivalry had enough history behind it that even a small gesture would have felt loaded. Breon chose something much bigger than a small gesture. He was telling the room, without saying much, that he still believed he belonged at the center of the division. And because Bumstead was standing right there, the whole thing felt even louder. Bumstead did not match the theatrics, and that changed the whole balance of the moment. Instead of rising to it, he stayed calm and brushed it off. He said Breon had a lot to prove and made it clear he was not impressed by the stunt. Then the contest arrived, and the result made the press conference moment land even harder. Breon did not win the title back. Bumstead held on to the crown. Terrence Ruffin finished second, and Breon ended up in third place. Number 3. Paul Dillet. Paul Dillet was already on stage at the 1994 Arnold Classic when one of the most disturbing moments in bodybuilding history began to unfold. He looked exactly the way fans had hoped he would. He was enormous, dry, and almost unreal in size. This was not a man fading under the lights or looking flat before the posing started. He looked dangerous. Then the image broke apart. Instead of moving smoothly through the poses, his body started shutting down in front of everyone. This was not a stumble or a quick loss of balance. One of the biggest men in the lineup suddenly could not move the way he needed to, and within seconds, it was clear the people around the stage were going to have to step in. That moment hit so hard because Paul Dillet was not just another competitor in the show. He was one of the most imposing physiques in the sport. One of those bodybuilders who looked like he had been built in a lab for pure mass. People knew him as Freakenstein, and by the early 1990s, he had already made real noise on the pro scene. He made his Mr. Olympia debut in 1993 and placed 6th, which told everyone he was not just massive, but already dangerous at the highest level. Later in his career, he would go on to win the 1999 Night of Champions. But even before that, his size alone had made him one of the most talked about men in bodybuilding. When he walked out, people expected power, control, and dominance, not helplessness. Then came the breakdown. During prejudging, Dillet started posing, and the cramping became severe. One side of his body seized up so badly that he could not lower his arm. He lurched off stage once, tried to come back, and then the nightmare repeated itself. As he went into another back pose, the spasms hit again. This time, there was no saving the round. He locked up so badly that he could not continue. Multiple officials had to come out and carry him off because he could not walk off under his own power. The sight was brutal. A giant bodybuilder, rigid from head to toe, being lifted and dragged away because his own muscles had turned against him. Years later, Dillet said the crisis had been even worse than the audience realized. He described it as a chemical imbalance. He said he had seized up from the neck down. Later, after he was taken to the hospital, he learned that his heart had stopped for 1 full minute. The prep behind it only made the whole thing darker. Later retellings tied the incident to extreme dehydration and the brutal measures bodybuilders were taking to come in drier and harder on stage. In simple terms, Dillet had pushed his body into a state where it could no longer function normally under the lights. His surface veins had collapsed so badly that paramedics struggled to place an IV. What makes his story even more remarkable is that this was not the end of him. Despite how close the incident came to killing him, he returned to competition in 1996. He rebuilt, kept going, and years later climbed high enough to win the Night of Champions in 1999. Number 2. Dallas McCarver. At the 2017 Arnold Classic Australia, fans thought they knew what the big story would be. Dallas McCarver had just taken second to Brandon Curry at the New Zealand Pro the weekend before, and Australia looked like the perfect chance to run it back. It was supposed to be another heavyweight showdown, another chance for Dallas to reset the story and maybe flip the result. He was one of the names people had come to see. Then, prejudging started, and the whole weekend changed. In a matter of seconds, the show stopped being about placings, predictions, or a rematch with Curry. It became about whether Dallas McCarver was okay. That hit harder because Dallas was not just another man in the lineup. He was one of the biggest young names in open bodybuilding. Fans knew him as Big Country. He had turned pro at just 21 in 2016. He won the Chicago Pro and then placed 8th at the Mr. Olympia, which made people take him even more seriously. A few months later, he backed that up with 2nd place at the 2017 Arnold Classic in Ohio. He was huge, young, and already moving fast. When Dallas walked on stage, people did not see a fringe bodybuilder trying to steal attention. They saw one of the sport's most watched rising stars, a man many believed could become one of the biggest forces in bodybuilding if his climb kept going. Then came the collapse. Prejudging was underway when something clearly started going wrong. Dallas looked off, and soon he dropped badly enough that the footage spread fast and instantly became news in bodybuilding circles. He did not keep pushing through the round. He did not come back later and try to save the weekend. The moment ended his contest. Dallas withdrew from the finals, and what should have been one of the biggest appearances of his season was over before it had really begun. Afterward, the explanation made the whole scene even darker. Dallas said he had been fighting an upper respiratory infection that had turned into bronchitis. On top of that, he said he had been depleted and dehydrated after weeks of prep, travel, and hard dieting. And that combination had put him in a bad place before he ever stepped under the lights. Then his coach, Chad Nichols, added something even more telling. He said he should have pulled the plug earlier, not just in Australia, but even before that, including New Zealand. The Australia footage became even harder to watch later that year. In August of 2017, Dallas McCarver died at just 26 years old. What makes this case so different from the Rage stories is that there was no fight, no tantrum, and no stunt. Dallas McCarver did not attack anyone. He did not try to make a scene. His body just stopped holding up under the pressure of the stage. In a lineup full of giant physiques trying to look perfectly steady and fully in control, Dallas suddenly became the one man who could no longer hold himself upright.
Number 1. Vinrage.
On November 5th, 2017, there was nothing huge or glamorous about the stage in Mangaluru. This was not the Mr. Olympia. It was not a giant international show with famous names and bright headlines waiting outside. It was a district-level bodybuilding contest at Don Bosco Hall, the kind of event built around local competitors, local pride, and a crowd that had come to watch men from their own area try to show the best shape of their lives. Vinrage had already made it through the first round. The second round was coming up next. Then, in the middle of what should have been a normal competition evening, everything changed. He collapsed during the event, and the whole room suddenly went from contest mode to panic. What makes the story hit harder is who he was away from the stage. Vinrage was 34 years old. He was from Kodimule in Ferengipet. He worked as an electrician. He was not some full-time star living inside a bodybuilding bubble. He was a man with an ordinary working life who was also chasing something personal through the sport. Police said he had been married only 6 months earlier. That one detail changes the whole feel of the story. It reminds you that this was not just a competitor imposing trunks under stage lights. This was a newly married man from a real home with a real job, trying to make something happen for himself at a district-level show, while the rest of his life was still moving outside the gym. The contest itself was being held under the Dakshina Kannada District Amateur Bodybuilders Federation. Vinrage had already taken part in the first round, and reports said he was getting ready for the second when his body suddenly gave out. Early accounts described it as an apparent heart attack or cardiac arrest. He fell during the competition and had to be rushed to a nearby private hospital. Doctors could not save him. Police were careful about the wording at the time. They said it appeared to be cardiac arrest, but that the exact cause would only be confirmed after the post-mortem report.
Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.